Sometimes in life we are posed with nigh on impossible decisions, and that is what today's Desert Island Discs is likely to bring our way, because I'm dropping down to a shelf with a lot of R's on it, and as you can see by the thumbnail, Robocop, Rambo, Rocky. There's some classics on this shelf, and I've got to pick just one. Hello everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of Desert Island Discs, where, as you know, if you watch already, I go through a shelf of my collection. We take a look at every film on that shelf, and then I have to pick one above all else, what my favourite film is upon all those films on the shelf that I would take with me if I were stranded on a desert island, if I had that choice. Forget the fact about having a setup and all that sort of a thing, but you get where the series of this series is going with that. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my position so I can get to the films behind me, because they are just down here, the ones we're going for. And while I'm doing it, as we go along, you tell me what film you would pick at the end and try and guess what film you think I am going to pick. I think this is going to be a difficult one, to be honest. So let's get ready. Okay, so we are down the aisle. Now you may be wondering why during winter am I dressed in just a sleeveless t-shirt for the summer. And that is because the date is exactly... Alexa, what's the date?
Today is Tuesday, September 12th.
September 12th. Alexa, what's the temperature?
At the moment, it's 21 degrees Celsius.
So it's 21 degrees outside.
You can expect a low of 14 degrees.
It's 21 degrees outside as I'm filming, and we've just come towards the end of that September heat wave, but it's still quite warm, and up here it's still quite warm as well. So anyway, so we're in position with the camera and where I need to be. So we are going to go through a shelf here. Last week or 2 weeks ago we'd done this bit here along the top. We're now doing this entire bit here. So let's begin. Now there's no collectibles on this shelf whatsoever to take a look at or show. So we're going to jump straight into proceedings of the films. And first off, we jump into what is an 80s classic without any hesitation. We jump into Sylvester Stallone in First Blood, the very first Rambo film. And this film is a classic. It truly is. I do have 4K version, a couple of 4K versions as well for this. The film speaks for itself. It is a fantastic movie. It kind of goes without saying. And then we have Rambo First Blood Part 2. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't James Cameron work on this film? I believe he did. He had something to do with it. Screenplay by James Cameron. As Rambo films go, it's a decent action film, but to be honest, that one and Part 3 I don't really visit too often. Interesting with Part 3, it's one of the most expensive films made at the time when it came out, and Stallone was at his physical peak in how he looked with his body and this sort of a thing in this film. The film very much, it's about Afghanistan and the Russians invading Afghanistan, so it had a basis in fact in the story and set during that era. But unfortunately for the film, when it was released, it was over. The Russians had pulled out of Afghanistan. And in this, you actually have, ironically, you have Sylvester Stallone teaming up with Al-Qaeda to fight the Russians. Because there was a time when they weren't a terrorist faction as we know them to be, or have known them to be in more recent years. Since, well, you know, the beginning of, well, however long it's been, I don't know, 9/11 and that 2000s. Yeah, and then we have here the extended cut of Rambo, or John Rambo as it is otherwise known in some territories. And this one is quite a, you know, I've watched this a fair few times. It's a decent film. It was a decent sort of return to form. It didn't have him going up against big helicopters and nonsense like that. But yeah, a decent movie. And then we have Last Blood. But for some reason I opted for the First Blood, Last Blood double pack. It didn't cost me much more than what it would have done if I'd just picked up Last Blood. And I do have Last Blood. I believe I have it on a steelbook. I believe. I'm 90% sure I do. I must do, because it's got the, yes, it's got the extended cut on it, where you've got the stuff where he saves the horse, or the people with he's on the horse at the beginning and that sort of stuff. Now, Last Blood is a decent enough Sylvester Stallone action movie, but it doesn't particularly work well for me as a John or a Rambo film. A John Rambo film. It's not really a Rambo film for me. It's an action film. And there we go. Next up, we have here Ready Player One. Now, when I first saw this film, I didn't particularly like it. I didn't particularly like it. But then on the second viewing, I loved it. And this isn't the only time this film will come up. I do have a couple of other copies of it in the old 4K sections and the steelbook sections. Yes. And then Jennifer Lawrence in Red Sparrow. I didn't mind. I thought it was quite good. However, I haven't really revisited it for some considerable time. Now, let's get into some Resident Evils. And we jump into a steelbook section here. Yes, I have steelbooks over here. A few steelbooks under the R's for the Resident Evil movies. And I do have 4K box set as well of them, which we got very cheap, about 30 quid. I think it's a Dutch release, and it's a slim case, but it's got all 6 films in it. But let's begin. So we have Resident Evil, the first one, and these are still sealed, these steelbooks, or most of them anyway. And I love these steelbooks. Out of all the Resident Evil steelbooks that were available, the pop art ones, etc., I like the ones with Milla Jovovich on the front with this kind of image behind, because, well, I quite like Milla Jovovich. So that's Resident Evil, the first one. Apocalypse. I recall enjoying this film. It was fun. I mean, these are not good films, don't get me wrong, but there's a kind of appeal to them, and I can sit down and I can enjoy them. And then we have Resident Evil Extinction, which is probably one of my favourites of the lot. Definitely the first 3 films I prefer over the latter 3 films, that's for sure. There's something about them, and this was directed by Russell Mulcahy, who directed Highlander. And then we jump into Resident Evil Afterlife. This is where I start to, they all start sort of rolling into one for me in my mind. The latter 3, Resident Evil Retribution. Now, unfortunately, they didn't do this set where you can see the background. It's all like got that grey hole type of a thing on the sign, and that's all the way through on these. They didn't do it for the next film. They didn't do one of those. They sort of did, but they didn't, in that they gave you that image there. And that's a great image, don't get me wrong. That's a nice image. It is just slightly different. Even though it's similar, it's different. See what I mean? But it's still a nice image for the final chapter. Yeah, that's a 3D version as well in there. And then I did get this in steelbook as well. I know there was several steelbooks available, and I just got what was cheapest when I found it, and that was that Resident Evil steelbook there. I know there's the other one with the umbrella on it. I didn't really like that one either. This one ain't great, but at least the characters are in there. And I only really got that just to stick with the sort of steelbook relevance of them, to keep that sort of aesthetic going, if that makes sense. And we're not done with Resident Evil yet, believe it or not. We are not done. Continuation of Resident Evil. We have Resident Evil Degeneration, which is the CGI animated, computer animated film. Follow up, Damnation. Vendetta. That feels quite heavy. Oh, there's 2 discs in there. Oh, you get a bonus disc in that one. That's why it feels heavy. Yeah, so Vendetta. Then we have the TV animated series Infinite Darkness. There. Any TV stuff I won't be including as an option of a take-in. We're just doing films here. I'll do TV down the line. Then we have Death Island, like that, which is the latest one. That was pretty good. And then we have well, just a random copy of another one of Resident Evil: The Final Chapter sat in there for some obscure reason, because I had that before the Steelbook. That's why that would be. Now we have, even though it's a P film, I put it under R because it is the Riddick collection. So Pitch Black. Pitch Black is an amazing film. And David Twohy directed. He also directed a film that I love called Below. Any chance I can get to talk about Below is fantastic. It takes me on to Below. I don't know where it is. It's under the B somewhere, but I can't seem to see it. It's a film. Here it is. Here. It stars Bruce Greenwood. That film there, just fantastic film if you haven't seen it. Okay, I highly recommend this film. It's set on a World War II submarine, and it's a spooky ghost story kind of thing on there. Back to this. Riddick. Yeah, so the first Pitch Black is a great film with Vin Diesel. Then you've got the Chronicles of Riddick on this one, and you've got Dark Fury, which is the animated film. So you can't take that whole box set in this video. It's the film. What film would you take? So for me, I wouldn't say, oh, I want to take all of these, because they're all there in one. I have to choose one film. See what I mean? That's how it works. But then we have, obviously, Riddick itself, which was okay. It's better than the Chronicles of Riddick, in my opinion. Yeah. It was nice to see the character back. And then we have Tom Hanks, Paul Newman and Jude Law in The Road to Perdition, which is actually based upon a graphic novel series. So essentially this is a comic book movie. It does fall under the comic book genre of films because it is based upon a graphic novel, small graphic novel series. So you can see how, like, you know, we've got some classics there at the moment that you might want to choose as your number one. So you've got First Blood, Rambo. You've got, with a Resident Evil fan, but you've got definitely Pitch Black, might be a choice of someone's. Road to Perdition is a strong film. And then we're stepping into the territory of the Rockies. So we got Rocky, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 5, and Rocky Balboa. Sylvester Stallone's seminal film series. It's fantastic. It's, you know, what can I say about that film series? What can I honestly say? Rocky's a fantastic film. Rocky 2's pretty good. Rocky 3 and 4 became very commercial, and I know people love the Rocky 3 and 4. I didn't like the commercial. I mean, they're good films, don't get me wrong. So what I'm saying is I'm not knocking the films in a sense. I didn't like how commercial they became. Rocky 3 is not one that I visit too often. Rocky 4 is very, very dated movie now, very dated. So I was very happy when they came along with the Rocky 4 director's cut, which I bought the Steelbook. This is the only Rocky Steelbook I bought because I'm not upgrading everything to 4K, no chance. And I bought this because of the inclusion, owned solely for the fact that it includes the director's cut version of the film that Stallone worked on not too long ago, which I think is a far better cut of the movie now. It takes away the stupidness of that robot, and it's a it's far more focused film. but there are some stuff that's probably been removed that is unfortunate and a shame that it's been removed. But yeah, so to sit down and watch Rocky 4, the standard theatrical cut, I find very difficult just because of how dated and how much it feels like a music video more than anything else. But there we go. So you got the Rockies as contenders there. Rocky 5 is one that I don't visit too often, and Rocky Balboa caused me issue in an earlier episode of this when I pulled I had one that was just floating around randomly. It was probably the episode before this, and it made me question whether I should put Rocky Balboa as my pick in that video over Robin Hood, I think it was, if I recall correctly. I don't know. And then we have the continuation of the series, Creed and Creed 2. Now this came out at an interesting point in Hollywood where they realised remakes don't work. Remakes are not really working, not making us any money. So we've got to do something else. We've got to do, and they came out with this idea of basically doing a remake of a film, but dressing it up as a sequel. So what we'll do is we'll make a film that follows the exact same beats as the first one. We'll call it a sequel. We'll have new characters going through the exact same things, but we'll have a couple of original cast members in there. So we're appeasing a newer audience at the same time appeasing the existing fan base. And you saw several films do this. Obviously, Creed is essentially a remake of Rocky. Jurassic World is a remake of Jurassic Park. Star Wars The Force Awakens is a remake of Star Wars A New Hope. To a lesser extent, you had films like Vacation do it. Vacation being a remake of National Lampoon's Vacation. Do you see what I mean? So they cottoned on to this kind of clever way of doing it. Still bugs me though. Although Creed 1 was a very, very good film. I was dead against the idea of it. I was like, no, this ain't. Why are you doing this? Why just let Rocky went out with such a strong ending with Rocky Balboa. It was fantastic for the character. A very good sort of goodbye to the character. Then you had Creed, but it worked. It worked, and it was a very good film. And Stallone gave a phenomenal performance in it as well. I won't not say that. Obviously, Creed 2 sees Stallone in it as well, and Stallone himself has his own battle in that. And then you come to Creed 3, which is completely Stallone-less. That upset a few people, but I'll be honest, from a narrative viewpoint, it makes sense that Rocky Balboa isn't in Creed 3. Do I miss Rocky being in it? Yes, I do. Would I like to have seen Stallone in it? Yes, I would. But it makes more sense that he's not there. That being said, I don't know. But anyway, let's move on. Yeah. But no, I will say it makes Creed, it makes the same mistake as what Last Blood does, in that the character had a fantastic ending. You know, Stallone finally came home in this film. He finally got to where he wanted to be at the end of the first film. His journey had ended. And then you come and give us Last Blood. And the same with Rocky Balboa. You put the character at a point where it's a fitting end, a fitting tribute and end to that character. Then you have, but Creed was well worth it, I will say that. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. And we have Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was a contender up against Rocky Balboa on the previous shelf, I believe, because I had another copy of this. And this will come up again, because I have, still have the old Blu-rays in there, because I have special edition versions right up the top, running all the way along the top that you can't see. And Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is in there as a 4K. And then we have Ridley Scott's Robin Hood with Russell Crowe, which was all right. There's a sort of Robin Hood origin story. It's okay. It was okay. Then we have, remember, you can only pick one of these. You can't say the trilogy. Then we have the RoboCop trilogy. And I also have this again. It will come up again because I have 4K of it. Now, RoboCop trilogy. RoboCop, classic film, brilliant film. I love it. I love everything, every aspect of that film. I love its satire, the feel of it, the sort of rough feel to the film. I love the design of the robot, of RoboCop himself. Everything in that film comes together and fundamentally works. Then you've got RoboCop 2. It's got pacing issues. I know that. Whenever I've watched it, even from when I first saw it, when it first came out, I felt this film drags. It does drag. But it used to scare the crap out of me as well when I was younger. The idea of Kane, the robot, that scared me for some reason. I don't know why. There was something about it that had a very scary element to it, so it worked in that sense. Then RoboCop 3, a film that I very rarely visit. There. Now, interestingly, RoboCop was given a 4K release, and I don't feel that it warranted it. I don't feel that RoboCop works as a nice, crisp picture. The film has got to have a rough feel to it. It adds to the movie. It adds to the whole character of the movie being somewhat rougher in tone than being nice, crisp, clear picture. So for me, the 4K of RoboCop doesn't work. However, I do have it. But yeah, and then we have here, and these won't be a contender, we have two versions of RoboCop the TV series. Because that's the German one that came out ages and ages ago. Uncut and remastered. And then we have the series there. And I've got a real soft spot for RoboCop the series. I don't know why. I've got a real soft spot for it. I find it to be a very fun series. Now, RoboCop, in my mind, is a one and done movie. The story's been told. By the end of the first RoboCop film, you've got nowhere to take. No, you have got somewhere to take the character, and it was marginally touched upon. But by the end of RoboCop, you've got nowhere to take this character, really, right? Because the whole film, forget the sort of analogies to Christ and all that sort of thing. But what the film essentially is the story of a man who has to rediscover his identity and rediscover who he is. And he goes on this journey of rediscovery. And by the end of the film, when he's discovered and rediscovered who he is, the story's been told. There's nowhere else to take the story. And there's, there are two options, two routes. There's a third route you could go down, which is the one that they've never really touched upon, which would be my idea for a sequel. But basically, you've got two routes you can go down. Number one, and this is what RoboCop 2 done, bigger, badder robot. Robot versus robot. That's what RoboCop 2 is. And RoboCop, the TV series, reflects the other side of what they could do, which is the police procedural story. Police procedural stories are very big in TV, and that's exactly what RoboCop is and touches upon. So you have these two options, and neither of them really fulfilled their what they could do. But for me, RoboCop the TV series is more the logical route than fight another robot, fight another robot, fight another robot. It's police procedural. And in that you can tone it down. So I do have a bit of love for the RoboCop TV series, primarily because they don't mix up the character. He looks exactly the same and this sort of a thing. Now, RoboCop 3 had an interesting story take on it, in that it was about the relocation of individuals in gentrification, essentially. It's about gentrification, which is a very political subject. It touches upon stuff that is happening in the real world, not to that extent and how it's done there, but it's certainly a thing that happens, and I see it here in London all the time. So it touches upon something of interest, but however, ultimately the film fails. Now, the other route that you could take RoboCop down, the emotional route, and you need that emotional core for a story, is it's got to be surround his wife and his son and their discovery of him, him, that he's alive, that the father's alive. Because by the end of RoboCop, he's back to being Alex Murphy. So how does that affect? And I know these are bits that have been touched upon in the TV series, and even RoboCop 2 to a small extent, she found out. But that's what your film needed to be. That needed to be the core story of your sequel if you wanted it to work, if you wanted an emotional story like what the first film gave us. We weren't given that. But that's the only real route you can go down with a character. But otherwise, it's a one and done film. You've trapped yourself with the concept of the story, essentially, without going police procedural. Or robot versus robot. We can't get too much out of that. And then here, again, these aren't choices, but we have RoboCop the Animated Series and RoboCop Alpha Command, which are the two animated RoboCop TV series that were done. So yeah, there we have that. Now I do have, and they will come up later down the line at some point, the RoboCop TV films, Prime Directives. There was 4 of them. It was RoboCop made on no budget whatsoever, but with a lot of heart. They're not great, but you know. So anyway, next up, keeping with that RoboCop, we have RoboCop the remake, and it's a film I don't visit. It's not very good, as remakes aren't. It's got a good cast in Joel Kinnaman as RoboCop, Michael Keaton, Gary Oldman, Samuel Jackson. So you're on to a winner with the cast there, but ultimately the film failed. I didn't mind the sort of twist on the origin, on the, you know, how they go about. In RoboCop, he loses his identity and he has to rediscover who he is. In this, he's aware of who he is from the get-go. There was a nice sort of juxtaposed element to the story in that they turn it on its head. But ultimately, it was, you know, you had a great cast, but a RoboCop remake would never work. I mean, you know, look at the design. It's no. You can't, you know. That's perfection. That is perfection. Like the Predator himself. You start messing with the design of these characters, these creatures, and because they're perfect as they are. Perfect as they are, and that's another failure on that film's part. Anyway, moving on. We've got another film here that is a classic, and it could be a contender, obviously, for someone, and that is The Rock. And this is really the film that made me sort of sit up and notice Nicolas Cage. I think this is a fantastic, phenomenal film. I love it. I really do. This and Con Air, they came out. This is 96. Con Air came out in 97. You got great performances from Connery, from Cage, from Ed Harris. It's just a great film. I love it. And then we move into some Arnie territory. We've had some Stallone. Let's pick out an Arnie. The Running Man. And again, I do have a 4K version of this that will come up again. Yeah, a good film. It's a fun film. It feels very dated, but it's a decent film. And it's that kind of, and it's kind of indicative of TV today, in a sense, in that we're given, you know, today's TV is all about real people doing stupid nonsense stuff, which is essentially what that is, not nonsense stuff, but you get what I'm saying. Where you got things like, you know, Love Island, or then people in the jungle, and I don't watch none of that stuff. I don't watch no reality TV. It's not for me. It never has been. I hate reality TV. It's made for the masses who don't realise that it's cheap TV. It's being made because there's no budget to it. Yes. I remember when it started becoming big in about 2008, 2009, around that era when we had a recession and a lot of high street shops shut and that sort of a thing. And ITV turned around and said, we're no longer making things like Sharp. We had the original series of Sharp, and then they had the 2 TV movie ones, the bigger ones, miniseries, where they'd done them a couple of years apart, like Easter special type things. And afterwards they said, we're not going to put money into this sort of a thing, because basically we don't want to put money into script writing. We don't want to put money into costume and set design and filming on location and makeup and all that, all that sort of stuff. But no, what we can do is we can make reality TV. You're invited on to make mugs of yourselves. And it don't really cost us anything to produce. That's what that is. Then we have another Arnie. It's got stickers on this one. Is this the first one I've pulled with a sticker on this time? I think it is. Red Heat. Belushi, James Belushi, and Arnie, where he plays the Russian cop in Comes to America. I haven't seen this film that many a time, I'll be honest. By the way, Running Man was based on a short story by Stephen King. Sorry, I neglected to say that. He'd written it under a assumed name, as I recall. Okay, so another Arnie one. And that is Red Sonja with Bridget. I was going to say Bridget Sonja. Bridget Nielsen, who went on to marry Sylvester Stallone. She was in Rocky IV. Yeah, basically Arnie's third Conan outing, without calling him Conan because they weren't allowed to. Very messed up rights kind of thing with these characters, because yeah, even though they inhabit the same world, the rights are disjointed. But no, Red Sonja, I'd done this as a watch party on Gareth Video Tasties a while back. Yeah, I have a 4K steelbook of that as well. It may have already come up. Then we have a classic film, and again 4K of this. Roger Rabbit, Who Framed the aforementioned character? 25th anniversary edition. Steelbook and 4K I have as well. So 3 editions of this. I've got multiple editions of films, I'm telling you. Bob Hoskins. It was a great film. Robert De Niro. Raging Bull. Martin Scorsese. All done in black and white. Very good film. It's been some time though since I've last seen it. Yeah, so as a contender, shall we say, for heavyweight, you got Rocky and you got Raging Bull, and obviously interestingly, both Stallone and Robert De Niro came together as boxers in grudge match. So it was Rocky versus, Christ, I'm drawing a blank on this. Jake LaMotta, that's it. I can't forget that. So basically, it was Rocky versus Jake LaMotta. It wasn't, but it had both of these characters as boxers, both of these actors as as boxers in the film. So how can you not think Rocky, Raging Bull? Then we have here, on the watch this one, another Robert De Niro actually, Red Lights. Picked up for £1, as you can see, with the intent of just watching it, because it was £1. So it's just, it's cheaper than a bloody rental when I get to keep it, even if it is rubbish. But no, I haven't watched it. I think someone told me it was rubbish when I showed it. This year's The Sixth Sense. That's Sigourney Weaver as well. It is Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver's in it. Her face was covered over by the CEX label. And here's a film that some people might add as their as their choice, and that's The Raid. Yeah, The Raid that everyone accuses Dredd ripped off Or actually, Dredd was written before this, I believe. The script for Dredd was written before The Raid. It was just that The Raid managed to get made and get out first. But no, so Dredd really didn't use this as a blueprint whatsoever. It just happened to be a very similar movie. But Dredd was actually there first. The Raid. Then we have The Raid 2. Still with stickers on. So these might be someone's top choice for their choice. Again, like I said, I hope you're sort of looking at these and thinking, what film would I pick over all else? Because this is truly a difficult shelf. Looking at it, you know, there's a lot of choice on here that, yeah. And then we have here, just peeling the bloody sticker off again. Can't get it off. I bought this for £10 from Arrow, and it is Runaway Train. Jon Voight. It's Jon Voight, isn't it? Yeah, Eric Roberts, Rebecca De Mornay. There's a name you don't hear often now, Rebecca De Mornay. Eric Roberts, the brother of Julia, who played the Master in the 1996 Doctor Who TV movie with Paul McGann, as well as being in other stuff. I recently reviewed a film with him in, which was a Megalodon Asylum movie. As I reviewed it recently as I'm recording this, obviously, bear in mind it's September. And then we have The Railway Man, £1.50, that cost me a slip. Colin Firth, Nicole Kidman, Stellan Skarsgård is in it, so it's got a decent enough cast. The stickers won't come off. So there we go. There's a look at everything on that shelf. That's us. We're done. We've gone through it all. So that leaves the question as to what film would you pick, because there's some true classics on there from like the 80s era. There's Stallone, there's Arnie films, there's films like Ready Player One that people might gravitate towards, RoboCops, Rockies, The Rock. It's difficult. A very difficult choice and option of film there. But let me step away for a minute and I'll be right back and we shall discuss what film I'm going to pick. See what I mean? As choices go, this here offers up a very difficult one. There's a lot of good stuff on that shelf. It should be difficult, but it's not. It's not. Even though there's some films on there that, you know, I adore. There's a lot of films on that shelf that I adore. You know, some of the Rockies, some of the Rambo films. The Rock is another one that is considered. I consider a true classic. There's RoboCop that's a classic. There's a certain, you know, there should be a difficult option. But however, when I was going through it, I knew instantaneously that I would be picking RoboCop. I knew that I'd be picking RoboCop. It's the film I grew up on. It's, you know, even though I grew up with the others as well, like First Blood and Rocky and that. This film just, you know, on the basis of it, just the title RoboCop, it should be crap. That should scream at you, this is B-movie territory. This is a poor film, but it wasn't. Everything came together in this movie. It truly works. Interestingly, as I'm filming this, I am 2 episodes into RoboDoc, which is a 4-part RoboCop documentary about RoboCop, which, as you're watching this, I believe it is now out on physical media because it has a release date for December. So unless that gets pushed back, it is out already, and I would have picked it up and have it in the collection. But like I said, I'm actually, episode 3 is today, the 12th. We're at the 12th, I believe, and so episode 3 is today, so I'll be able to download that and watch that one. I've just got a lot of love for this character. You know, I've got some RoboCop bits over there. As you can see, I've got the car. I've got an Ed 209. I've got a RoboCop there, big RoboCop. I used to have a RoboCop gun, but I sold it. I sold it at a point where my mental health wasn't particularly good, and I was unloading stuff, and I was having to clear out of collectibles and things like this because it felt like I was offloading my mind, and I sold the RoboCop. I had the proper pistol. It was a BB gun. It was a working BB gun. It was black and everything, and I sold it. Bang. Sometimes you regret things. I don't regret a lot in life. I do regret getting rid of that gun. But anyway, it's been gone. It's done. But I love the RoboCop. I've got the Marvel comic books. I've got the comic books published under Boom Studios, under Dark Horse. I've got a book on the making of it. There's just something about this film that I adore. So for me, it was a very easy choice. I mean, even the TV series, like I said, you know, yes, the first film is fantastic, and when it comes in a comparison to all the others, the other films and TV series are nowhere near as good. However, you know, I was excited about the release of this, and I was moaning constantly before this came out because it kept getting pushed back and back and back, and I really wanted this release of RoboCop the TV series, but yet I already had it like that. But I was so excited about this more than anything else, and I don't know why. It's because of the character. I've got so much love for the RoboCop character that anything and everything that's RoboCop, I generally gravitate towards. It's just a solid piece of filmmaking. It was lightning in a bottle. Like I said, really is a one and done story. Unless you take my approach to a sequel. Yeah, so that's my choice of film, RoboCop. I would let all the others go over that film. I love it. I'm in love with it. I'm in love with RoboCop. Not in that sense. You know, I wouldn't want him to... And then whatever he can do with that thing, I wouldn't want him to do it. No. But yeah, so there's my choice. So let me know yours. Let me know yours in the comment down below. Out of all the films that we've looked at on that shelf, like I said, I reiterate, there's some classic films on that shelf. And, you know, they would all fall very high up in my... A lot of there would probably fall high up in a ranking of you know, if I'd done top 100 films, there's a few on that shelf that are gonna make that cut, obviously, and very high up in that top 100. I'm talking First Blood, I'm talking some of the Rockies and The Rock and things like that, and RoboCop, obviously. RoboCop might even make my top 10 films of all time. Came from an era when, you know, Aliens, Terminator, Predator, you know, the 80s were when in my mind is when Hollywood just... everything came together, everything. I'm talking about special effects increased to the point where you could now do stuff. Stories were fantastic, characters, emotion, soundtracks, everything just came together perfectly to give us the 80s and the early 90s. And unfortunately after that it's a bit of a downhill trend for film, and we're at where we're at now. But yeah, everything came. You had Die Hard in that era. Everything just came together. It was a fantastic time. So like I said, let me know down below your thoughts, your comments, what you would pick, what you think of my pick, what you may have thought I would have picked. Let me know reasons why you've picked what you've picked. Maybe your first experience of that film, whatever, and we can talk about it. And yeah, let's do it. I'll see you on the next one, because in 2 weeks' time I will be back, and we are looking at... we're jumping into some S's, because we are going to venture down there. And as we know, S is a letter that will contain a lot of decent film as well. Superman, Star Wars, Star Trek. You know, these films are likely going to come up at some point, and again, it puts us in that position of having to choose among others. I've even got Steven Seagal stuff down there. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, come join the channel, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of Desert Island Discs.